Hello, Mister. Well, thank you again for this interview you're calling me today. So the subject we have today is about the European integration of Mediterranean countries and economic expansion and production of power. And so you are Mario Monta. You are you're a professor here at the Faculty of Political Science in Zagreb. You take the courses of public policies and sorry and presenting these courses to different students all around Europe, which is incredible and interesting for your presence and for your parkour. So now we will begin this interview with the first question. Is the European integration model based on the European semester conditionality and structural funds applicable to Mediterranean candidates or partner countries whose economics and institutional structures differs significantly from those of the new member states?
So you specifically think about the candidate countries like Montenegro, etc.
Yes.
Or do you mean a sort of the neighborhood?
Yes, especially since they're like there are only the Balkans and the Eastern countries that needs to be added to the European Union. The Balkans also, since they are part of the Mediterranean structures, is still important.
I mean, it's we already within the European Union we have sort of a set of Mediterranean countries, obviously, which garner their sort of Mediterranean approach. Which you can see maybe in the welfare state system, but also in the more broader economic interests of these countries. So, including, for instance, France, Italy, Croatia, etc. So it's not that already within the European Union we have sort of very, very stable and similar economic and institutions and structures. So there's already within the EU sort of this diversity. You have sort of export countries, import-oriented countries. For the Mediterranean sort of countries, more they're more reliant on sort of tourism, for instance, which is quite important for them. Maybe lack a bit of the industrial aspect, like Croatia, for instance. So there is diversity already, and for the rest sort of the candidate countries, I mean, when you look sort of at the acquis that they will have to accept or adopt, so the legal frameworks and different policies, obviously, that's something that everyone had to go through already. Also the Eastern European countries when they joined in 2003 and 2007, and then Croatia as well. So that's it's a process that I mean, at least in the past, this process of integration through conditionality. So this was considered sort of a successful way of integrating. But over time, obviously, we saw when these Eastern European countries joined the European Union, there has been some backlash and some regression. Sort of you can talk about democratic backsliding, for instance. Some countries like Romania, Bulgaria have also had special instruments following them even after accession, to make sure that they have their sort of judiciary and media system and everything else up to the standard. So we see the benefits, but also the flaws of conditionality. And it's I mean, it works when there's sort of a credible perspective for these countries to actually join the EU. Then the motivation is high. Then work pays off eventually. But if there's no credibility, sort of in the carrots, which is sort of EU entry or accession, then conditionality is also just becomes sort of a ticking the box exercise. Luckily, I think with the experience of that the European Union had in the recent crisis in the last 15 or 20 years, there has been growing recognition within the European Commission, for instance, that imposing things from above or imposing things from outside the countries without their sort of national ownership over these reform processes or investments, you cannot really go too far. So I think the first recognition came with the Eurozone crisis, and then we saw, with the migration crisis again, a backlash against external imposition of policies. So with the COVID crisis, it's I think the first time that we actually see a more balanced approach, and this I think gets reflected in also the discussions on enlargement, that no one will ask these countries to become absolutely harmonious with the others. Everyone recognizes, obviously, each member state has its own sort of areas where it thrives, and others where it's a bit more lacking in development, both economically, socially, or institutionally. But I think it's ultimately, what happens in practice, and it's unavoidable, is that both conditionality and these positive incentives for structural funds inevitably become absorbed in those areas which the sort of the governments of these candidate countries actually um, find it appropriate to spend on. So to boost sort of already existing domestic priorities. But with the sort of increasing conditionality of these funds, sort of both in the direction of green and digital, it's there is a danger that that these governments might sort of use these funds to just for the sake of spending it, and not actually creating solid basis for growth or development. Yeah.
Okay, that's really interesting point that you made. That can also lead to our second question, which is also linked, which is enlargement to the Western Balkans has often been presented as a geopolitical priority for the EU since the invasion of Ukraine.
Yeah.
And so, does the European perspective offered to neighboring Mediterranean countries reflect a genuine integration strategy? Or is it more for a tool for stabilization or influence without credible path to
Yeah.
membership?
It's a lot about the wording, and even within your question, you see there's one term that used to be circulating in the Brussels bubble as a way of saying, well, we will keep you close, but eventually we won't promise anything. And that's the concept of a European perspective. What does it mean? Your European perspective for Albania, a European perspective for I don't know, Kosovo or Montenegro. It doesn't promise anything, right? It's not, but when you say enlargement, that's quite concrete and specific. So I think that there is, especially since the invasion, the rhetoric has changed, because EU leaders have recognized, well, if we stop with this very vague notions of European perspective, then we might lose the race with other global powers that have a sort of a genuine interest in the in the region. So both China and Russia. So I think the signaling to these countries has become stronger, but effectively there is no sort of willingness for any big bang expansion in the short run.
Okay, so it will be
So-
more step by step.
I think, I mean, it will be very important for the European Union to demonstrate that there is some tangible progress, and that member states will actually join. And I mean, I think Croatia is one example of that. One bright case amidst a sort of global financial crisis. So the EU, Croatia joined in 2013 as the only country, so it was not in a bulk with others, which sort of left the door open for further enlargement, but not in a sort of a big band way. And it's a sort of signal to other member states, well, it's possible, and it's not just sweet talk. I think something similar might be happening. We saw that there's no appetite for Ukraine to join anytime soon, at least not in this decade. We might see maybe Montenegro join before, but that there was certainly not. There will certainly be no big expansion, both from the Balkans, and the Caucasus and the and Ukraine at the same time. So I think it's the EU is trying to signal a seriousness, but in practice it's not following through with that doesn't walk the talk. But this strategy cannot, it cannot work forever. So the EU will have to demonstrate that that membership is achievable and that it's a credible promise to these member states. Otherwise, I mean, everyone is aware that you can lose a country just like that. And I mean, there are even within the European Union different actors who advocate for enlargement for different reasons, right? For instance, Viktor Orban, who's now been ousted in the Hungarian elections. I mean, he's been a great advocate of enlargement, although he's Eurosceptic, but still, he wants Serbia to join. He wants, Montenegro and others to join. Not Ukraine, obviously, but I mean, for obvious reasons, right? Because with Serbia, for instance, or Bosnia, you would have states in the European Union who would be sort of challenger states to the more federalist vision of Europe, and that goes in line with sort of this sovereignist vision that Orban had, right? So it's like a Trojan horse strategy of enlargement for the purpose of creating this union within the union. So I think that there is a sort of hope for these countries to actually join, but it will not be happening at the same time for all of them.
Okay, that's really interesting what you said. So in the end, so in those countries, which country will be more possible to join the EU in the many years coming?
Well, I mean, all of these that I mentioned, but I think Montenegro is sort of the closest to joining at the moment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So to continue on our questions, so we'll now see. So do the financial instruments deployed in the Mediterranean, the global gateway, the funding allocation under the neighborhood investment plans reflect a coherent economic power strategy, or do they fall short of for what is required for genuine production of influence in the face of different countries like China or Gulf petrodollars, or even the Russia presence in the Mediterranean Sea.
Yeah. First of all, I think these instruments are quite small in funding. I mean, they're not quite lucrative, and they're very EU centered, I would say. I mean, that they have a very very clear mission of upholding this asymmetry between the EU and the Mediterranean neighborhood. So be it sort of investment in migration, or digitalization, or the green transition, it serves the purpose of European interests, right?
Mhm.
So the question is, I mean, how is it a relationship of equals, or is it the EU again trying to sort of achieve its own goals through the wider region? So I mean, it's is it a coherent economic strategy of for the European Union? Maybe it is, because it's putting center its own interests. But will it lead to a more normatively more closer relationship between the Mediterranean neighborhood and the European Union vis-a-vis the other powers, global powers like China? I doubt. I think it's sort of it's a case by case scenario, probably. And it's I mean, if we talk about sort of normative alignment, it's very hard to achieve, given the fact that you have sort of different types of regimes there. Well, some are more, some are less authoritarian, if you wish. Then you have the oil states as well. So I think it's very hard for the EU to actually project any exclusive power on these countries. Will sort of be a at least on the Mediterranean neighborhood side, always a calculation. I don't know who with whom do we benefit more, with the Chinese or the Europeans? Who invests more, gives more money. And I don't think that at least at the moment the EU is keeping up with the promises of other global actors, because the funding is very very small. This might change maybe with Global Europe heading up the next multi-annual financial framework, but we'll see.
Okay.
It's with that.
Okay. That's that's really interesting, because would lead also to another question which is from the news and in the actuality. The war in Gaza has severely undermined the EU normative credibility on the southern and eastern shores of the Mediterranean. And so, does the crisis affect the Union ability to promote its economic and political model in the region, or not? It doesn't change. I told
Yeah.
from what is the perspective of the European Union and the vision of Brussels in the Mediterranean.
It's always some of the internal friction between countries is an obstacle to a more to a European Union that will act with a single voice, especially in these very tough questions. I mean, it's not that the EU as such hasn't advocated, um, for instance, for a two-state solution. The EU has done that, but I mean, there are critical voices to a um, to the European Union's institutions' vision of how it should act on the issues of the war in Gaza. So it's very, very, very difficult, these circumstances to have a European Union that um, how should I put it, exhibits credibility, I would say. Um, just because of the fact, that the different member states have different sort of ties to the region, different interests, historical
Yes.
legacies, and so on.
Yeah, the French interest will be different from interest from the from Spain or
Yes, yes, exactly.
Italy. Okay.
Yeah.
Mm, yeah, that's yeah. So like even like for Lebanon, in the like we saw yesterday or a few days ago, with Israel wanted like to put away France from the negotiation about South Lebanon. Since Lebanon is very close to diplomatically to the French Republic,
Yeah.
it will be more complicated, like to have the point of view of you on that subject,
Yeah.
since France is majority more important for them than the EU.
Yeah. And that's also sort of the case with North African countries as well. I mean, different historical ties, obviously, different economic interests. For instance, in the energy sphere. Well, so no, that's always sort of the bottom line. So different countries have different interests, and they might at some point converge, at some points collide. So it's creates an obstacle for a EU that acts with credibility and courage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And that's a good point. And also, the next question will go back on what you said about expansion and expansionism, about adding different countries, because it relate like to the imperial dimension in the analytical sense of the term, of course, of the European integration. So you already in a way respond to that question.
Yeah.
So to link it to another one, does the EU expansions toward the Mediterranean stem from the structural economic expansion, or from generally shared projects of co-development?
Yeah, I mean the political actors will always say that it's the later. So it's mutual interest, win-win situations, and so on. But sort of the history of EU's relations with the region, and also if you look at the trade agreements with that have been signed, it's always sort of a asymmetric relationship, or a way of sort of EU engaging in what some authors would call a new form of extractivism, sort of a environmental extractivism, if you wish, for the purpose of the green transition, for instance. And you can see that with the hype around sort of green hydrogen, for instance, and the economic opportunity that the EU sees in the Mediterranean region to become a sort of source of or a sort of one of the key cogs in the EU's green transition. So I would say, sort of on a rhetorical level, it's always depicted as a mutually beneficial project of developing these countries locally. But the devil is in the details. So if you look at what's actually going on, I think it's more the case of the EU trying to externalize the costs of the green transition to these regions in exchange for some benefits, for new jobs, maybe new investments. But ultimately, these investments, are they created for the benefit of the people of these countries or for the benefit of the EU's political goals? It's that's the tough question. I would argue it's more about contributing to EU's goals of the green transition on the one hand, and then you have the migration aspect as well, with the policy of sort of containment in a way. So publicly arguing that you are developing local communities, creating new opportunities for growth and jobs, and as a way of um, putting potential migrants off from actually going on a journey to Europe. Well, it seems to me that it's sort of the ultimate goal is basically to prevent migration and not to create better or more sustainable ways of living, or to increase the quality of life in these countries genuinely. It's more like an instrumental thinking, like
Yeah,
but
like in a political and an economic part
yes,
tool.
yes. So it's not a goal in itself, but the well-being of people, and it's not a goal in itself, but it's a instrument to prevent sort of more large migration waves. I would say. Um, what's that one?
Yeah, that's a really good point that you made about like that would maybe led to a migration culture with a lot of restraints made by Frontex or other for foreign allies like Turkey
Yeah.
or Tunisia or Morocco for all that problems that the European Union face in a way. So, but unfortunately, the European needs like this migration to have this economic boost against different different giants like the United States or China, for example. So against the backdrop of European budgetary refocusing on competitiveness and defense, what financial instrument does the EU actually retain to anchor Mediterranean countries within its orbit, present then to turning to other power like China or Turkey or even the Gulf monarchies?
Yeah.
That's that's in a way you already respond in a part with the migration solution that you evoked. So Benny, you have another example in mind.
Well, currently there's sort of this discussion of sort of the different pillars of the multi-annual financial framework. At least what I didn't see, maybe I'm mistaken, but there's sort of no specific sort of Mediterranean funding earmarked for that. It's more sort of a global Europe perspective. But whether the focus will actually stay on specifically on the Mediterranean, I'm not sure. It's so a grand strategy. Um, but with sort of individual member states, I see sort of that there will be sort of bilateral deals and agreements as they have already been put in place, many of them on the energy front and migration front. So and the trade agreements. So I think it will sort of reflect the EU's tendency to de-risk from both the US and from China by engaging more by diversifying its engagement with the rest of the world, including also then the Mediterranean countries.
Okay. Okay, and final questions, which is also linked with your final answer from the previous one. Is the conditionality imposed on the Mediterranean neighboring countries under association agreements or pre-accession instruments democratically legitimate, or does it reproduce a form of technocratic tutelage that undermines popular support for the UN project in the societies, or it is completely the opposite?
Well, that's a tough question. I mean, because I mean the public in these in these countries. I mean that there are obviously the public can be more Eurosceptic, or it can be more inclined towards the European Union. So depending on what kind of audience you have, some might be more inclined toward these conditionality. This conditionality narrative, and you could then sell this story to the public that it's something that we have to do in order to get in within to get to the to get inside the club, and the people would accept it. Another sort of whereas in other circumstances when you have a more Eurosceptic public, I mean the sort of conditionality based narratives, they don't really work well. So you the politicians then sort of shift the blame to the EU, and this just creates then a very bad image for the EU. So I think it depends on what kind of sentiment there is in the public of these countries. So depending on that, conditionality could be more or less successful, right? But of course, I mean the conditionality can be more democratically legitimate if it sort of reflects also the priorities of the given member state. In that case, the political actors would not have any trouble or issue with that conditionality. But in cases where where there's no such positive relation between the external incentives and the political priorities at home, then it can create some legitimacy gap, I would say. But it's typical. I mean, well, depends on areas, policy areas, and specific issues. But there'll always be sort of contentious issues that someone doesn't like to be implemented, especially with regards to, I don't know, tough reforms in the judiciary, or I don't know, media regulation, whatever. But yeah, it's about joining a club. So if you want to be a member of the club, well, no one is forcing you to get in. So it's at the end of the day, well, it's still the choice of the people, or
and the will,
yeah,
and the will to join, of course.
the will, the joy, yeah.
Well, yeah, that's that's the good things to wrap up. Thank you again for your time and your answers. That was really interesting. your vision about the EU and the Mediterranean was really interesting to talk about. I thank you again, and see you next time.
Thanks a lot.